Live to Queen's Park right now, interim Liberal leader John Fraser is commenting on the Greenbelt controversy. Let's listen live.
$3 billion Greenbelt giveaway. And to start by doing these three things. First, we have written to the chair of the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure and Cultural Policy to request a meeting next week to begin the process of interviewing those involved and to request that all pertinent documents be provided to that committee. Second, we are asking the Premier to waive all cabinet privilege as it relates to this $8.3 billion scheme. He has the power to do this, and Ontarians deserve answers. Third, Minister Clark breached the Members' Integrity Act. He acted in bad faith when he brought and supported this proposal to Cabinet. He failed in his responsibility as a minister, and as the Commissioner said, he stuck his head in the sand. He must step aside, or the Premier must remove him from Cabinet. Nous demandons de la première trois choses. Premier, nous avons écrit président du comité permanent du patrimoine, des infrastructures et de la politique culturelle pour demander une réunion la prochaine afin de rencontrer les personnes impliquées et pour demander que tous les documents pertinents soient fournis au comité. Deuxième, je demande que le Premier ministre renonce tout privilège du cabinet en ce qui concerne ce projet 8,3 milliards de dollars d'argent pour voter. Il a le pouvoir de le faire et les Ontariens méritent des réponses. Troisième, ministre Clark a enfreint la loi sur l'intégrité des députés. Il doit se retirer ou le Premier ministre doit l'écarter du cabinet. It is simply not believable that one political staffer, a rookie chief of staff, was the sole mastermind behind this $8.3 billion scheme. The Commissioner's report shows just how connected the whole of government was to what was going on. And the more I read, and the more I remember, it becomes more evident to me that all roads lead back to the Premier and his office. And we're not going to stop till we get to the bottom of this, because Ontarians don't deserve anything less. And I'll take your questions.
John, the Premier keeps saying the buck stops with me. Steve Clark yesterday said the buck stops with me. Does it look to you like the buck really stops with anyone?
Well, the buck's not stopping anywhere. Premier Clark's still here, and here I am really surprised that Minister Clark still has his job. You know, the longer the Minister Clark sticks around, the more this sticks to the Premier. The longer that Minister Clark is in his job, the more the stench or the smell of this thing rubs off on the Premier. It's clear the minister didn't do his job. He stuck his head in the sand. I think it goes deeper than that. He brought this to Cabinet full well knowing what he was bringing there. That is wrong. There's a principle of ministerial responsibility. So, you know, nobody's taking responsibility. Premier's not taking responsibility. He's starting to lash out at people, which is, you know, what we've seen before. Look, this is, you know, all roads lead back to the Premier's office. And here's why I think, you know, what makes me believe that that's the case. So the same people who funded Ontario Proud are the same people who the Premier promised he'd crack open the Greenbelt in 2018. And then, of course, he told us he wasn't going to do it. And then those same people gave the Premier and his party lots of money and got their friends too, and their suppliers and their contractors. And then those same people handed in brown envelopes. And at the end of the day, those same people won in the $8.3 billion cash for your land scheme. Now, I'm not a gambler, but I'd have to say that is a pretty amazing parlay. So, you know, I am shocked that the minister hasn't resigned. Bottom line is, the Premier has the power to waive cabinet documents. The committee has the power to sit. It should be done. It's the right thing to do on behalf of Ontarians. Do I think they'll do it? No, but that doesn't prevent us from calling on them to do that because it's the right thing to do.
John, can you draw a parallel between what you're asking for here and the inquiry into the gas plant scandals about a decade ago? Is what you're looking for something similar that the Progressive Conservatives would have supported back then?
100%. I mean, the thing is like we're not in a minority situation. I think the right thing to do, and the right thing to do in that case, was to have an open hearing about it, and to bring people in front of us to ask, well, what went on? You know, there are a number of public servants involved in this who were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, not to talk to their bosses. I'd like to ask a few people about how they felt about that, what they thought about that. I mean, you're asking them actually not to do what their job tells them to do, what their responsibilities are. So that's just one small part. And, you know, just as I said, if you look at all these same insiders are people who have followed along all the way at all these different points. And at the end of the day, they win. Magic.
Yeah, so what would be the purpose of this that would be different from what the Integrity Commissioner has done or the Auditor General has already done?
We get to ask questions. We have open testimony. You know, the Integrity Commissioner put an interpretation on it. He laid in front of us a body of evidence that, quite frankly, I think most people would agree. If you look at it, I've got more questions than I did yesterday, a lot more questions. And I think I'd like to ask some of those questions. And I think that members on all sides would want to ask those questions. You know, I think there are members on all sides of this House, including the government side, who say there's something wrong here. We need to get to the bottom of this. Because it's not going away. You know, I ran into Jerry Phillips last night. And if you remember, Jerry was involved with Ipperwash. And so he said this thing to me. He said, these things can take a long time, right? It's not going to go away. Just be persistent. Keep asking questions. Keep pushing. It took Ipperwash 8 years. So, you know, to get to the bottom of this, it's going to take time. It's not going away. And we're going to stay on this in that same way. And so hopefully we can have some success with that. But we'll get to the bottom of it.
What would it say if the government does not agree to do this? If they block this in committee and they won't waive document privilege, what does that say about this situation?
Well, look, there's a cover-up. The cover-up started when they asked those public servants to sign an NDA, right? The reality is, you know, the Auditor General said this wasn't really a process. It was more of an exercise. So, you know, we have to find some way to get to the bottom of this. And the only way we're going to do that is to keep asking questions. And the more venues that we have to ask questions in, the quicker and more effectively we'll get to it. I know the government's going to try to avoid it. The minister seems like he's not going to resign. The longer this sticks around, the more it smells. The longer this sticks around, the more it sticks to the Premier. And maybe that's the right thing, because it looks to me like all roads lead back to the Premier and his office.
With a reprimand, you've been here a long time. What's likely to happen?
Well, a reprimand is saying you broke the act, that's wrong. I think it's up to the member and his boss, the Premier, to provide the sanction. Like a reprimand, that's a serious thing. It's a serious offense. He breached his obligation to Ontarians. He took something to cabinet that he knew wasn't good, wasn't right. He stuck his head in the sand. You know, and one might argue, if he put his head in the sand, does that mean the Premier put his head in the sand? Does that mean all of cabinet put their heads in the sand? Ontarians elect us to do the right thing, to ask questions, to make sure that the decisions that we make can stand, you know, a test. And what it sounds like, the minister didn't put it to a test, the premier didn't put it to a test. Like that, that's a serious thing. What that says is, you're a minister, you didn't do your job. The first thing in your job, to look after the interests of Ontarians. For that alone, he should resign. I think there's much more than that here. I think if you take a look at the whole of what we've seen, there are just too many things that connect together.
Why do you think the premier is so adamant about keeping Steve Clark? I asked him this morning why the minister was such the indispensable man, and he didn't really give an answer. Why do you think, what is motivating this?
I can't tell you. I mean, because I got to tell you that well, maybe it's that when one domino falls, the rest start to fall. So one domino's fallen. If Clark's the next domino, who's the next domino after that? The reality is, it's going to happen. The minister will have to go at some point. I've been around a long time. Because the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get for the premier, his cabinet, and his caucus. I know that, like I know the sun's going to come up in the east tomorrow. And I'm not sure why the government doesn't understand that and just do the right thing.
Anything you'll be watching for when Clark speaks today?
I'll be looking for him to step down. I'll be looking for him to step down, or at least explain why he's not stepping down, why he thinks that it's okay for a minister of the Crown to stick his head in the sand, to ignore what's being given to him, to bring forward a proposal that he knows is probably weak because he's afraid. That's not what we have ministers for. We have ministers there to bring stuff to cabinet that can stand tough questions, that's going to stand the test of time. And he failed. He failed miserably. And no, I didn't know, I stuck my head, just that alone is reason for him to be fired. In any other occupation, if you did something that egregious, you'd be canned. If you're a manager of a store and you fail to live up to your responsibilities to the company or to a customer or to an employee in that way, that you turned your head, that you stuck your head in the sand, you would be fired. So what's different about the minister?
You were at the AMO conference last week, and during the conference, the people there were cheering when the possibility of Clark's resignation was brought up, and then we have Indigenous leaders earlier this week saying they also want Clark gone. Can he? Is his ability to be a minister compromised by the fact that municipal leaders and staffers seem to want him gone, and Indigenous leaders?
It hurts. It hurts him, but the key reason that he shouldn't be there is he failed to live up to his responsibility as a minister in a very, very serious way. Right? Taking aside this whole, idea where a small group of people, really benefited and were able to influence government, he took something there that he knew wasn't good, and he supported it. And he got his colleagues to support it. And I would argue the premier also got cabinet to support it. That's why they need to waive all pertinent cabinet privilege as it relates to this. I'd like to see, did everybody stick their head in the sand? How did that go? I think that's fair. I'm a realist. I know that what the answer is probably going to be, but we got to ask the question, right? And I think that's what Ontarians would expect. They would expect that their premier would treat the people who work for him, work with him, the same way they're treated in their own places of employment. Why is Steve Clark above all that? I can't find any good reason. He needs to step aside, or the premier needs to remove him from cabinet.
We have no calls.
Perfect. All righty. Thanks.
Thank you.